And let me pull up the tweets for you.
Okay. Well,
You want me to pull up the tweets? With the questions?
okay. Well, actually, I'm going to read my statement first anyway.
Okay.
That doesn't look at all like what I... Are we live?
Yeah.
Okay, hello. Hi. I understand we're live. I'm Ted Nelson, coming to you from the Internet Archive. Supposedly going to respond to various questions. This is, you had a setup problem here. Good morning, or good afternoon, as the case may be. I guess it's afternoon or evening everywhere else that's going to be watching. Hello! I've looked at the questions, and I'd like to read an opening statement. Because a lot of the questions about the Xanadu structure, and for example, the Xanadu model in general, and annotation, which is a special case. So let's look at the big picture. In all the documents of the past, cuneiform scrolls, books, ancient, medieval, 19th century, 20th century, there were lurking issues that explode when we try to design screen documents. The Xanadu design tries to solve them all. An initial design, which I came up with basically in 1970 and expanded on, and then in 1979 we worked out the details. An initial design with the resulting structure and method, which we worked out in 1979 and which now moves on through the world. Stallman's method is another way of coping with these issues. It's draconian and closed, but I won't get into that. I respect Stallman very much, but it doesn't work for literature. So the issues are boundaries of the document, authorship of the document, views of the document, versioning, origins and contributory sources, ownership of the franchise, the right to continue, the right to derive, formerly restricted by copyright, ownership of the copy, and annotation. So all of these are different issues that have always been around, but when documents were on clay, tablets, or paper, the fan out of the ramifications was much less. So, as others have faced these things, what are the boundaries of electronic documents? What do you include? Authorship, there are so many diffuse cases. Views, now the emphasis is on fonts, white space, and hard carriage returns, which is a horror. You can't expand. One of the good things about the web is that when you expanded a page, the text would flow. So as the characters got bigger, you could read them. But now, with hard carriage returns, if you expand the text, they go off the end of the line and you can't read it. Okay. Versioning. Well, we don't even see that in today's world. Origins are completely lost, especially by search engine optimization. Ownership of the franchise or the right to continue. So, who had the right to continue the Tom Sawyer books? Mark Twain. So he wrote Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer Detective, Tom Sawyer Abroad. You might not have heard of that. Who had the right to continue the Hebrew Torah? Well, the Hebrews continued it with the Torah, and the Christians continued it with the New Testament. And then the Mormons continued that with the Book of Mormon. So the right to continue in the Oz books, the right to continue was maintained by the publishers Riley and Lee until the late 40s, then they gave up the franchise. Right to derive. Well, the web throws that away completely because anybody can do anything with anything they find. Ownership of the copy, well, you can save a web page. Annotation. In medieval manuscripts, it was the monks who annotated. In printed books of the 19th century, it was the editor who annotated. In this new simplified form of documents, that we now forms of document we now see, you have just chains of annotations by everybody making very little sense. No editorship. So, the Xanadu model. First of all, you have multiple windows with visible connections to sources, a selection of links reposing as a list of contents and a list of links, usually get together. The authorship is whoever assembled the contents. The origins and contributory sources, you can see the primary pieces. Versioning, well, classic Xanadu had versioning built in. Views, any could be programmed. Ownership of the franchise's current author is continuing that sequence of development. And the downloader can, of course, ownership of the copy, well, that's by the downloader. An annotation is a selection of annotations under editorship. Editorship, something that's being forgotten here. So I'm continuing the Xanadu work. Roger Gregory is still working on Xanadu Classic, and I'm building another one, Xanabase, with my partner in England, Edward Betts. So that's an overview of the system. The structure, of course, is collaging previous stabilized content. So that's an overview of the Xanadu structure. Now let's look at how do I do the window that shows me the twigs. Okay. So what stage of development is the current system currently at? Well, I learned long ago never to give time estimates. Real soon now is the... How can somebody implement your ideas, asks Michael Berg, without getting into trouble with your patents? I don't have any patents on Xanadu. I have a trademark, so don't use the name. So you say Xanadu derived, Xanadu inspired. So he says, someone with an incomprehensible name says, I want to get a real hypertext system. I want my docuverse. What should I be doing to make it happen? Can't help you. I'm only doing what I can. Somebody called it nothing much. How have the Xanadu-related ideas changed over the years? Well, the defining document, which I just found, was really in 1970, which I wrote for a brilliant kid named Nathaniel Kuhn. And that laid out the territory for what would become the Xanadu design in 1979. But the fixed design structure is collages of unchanging content. Are you hopeful of seeing these eyes materially? Yeah. Nothing much, asked a lot of questions. Dan Whaley says, there's a formal W3C recommendation for web annotations. Annotations, whatever they say, how are you editing them? How are you unifying them? How are you creating a reasonable collage? That's the question. Dan Whaley asks, oh, this is Dan Whaley of the annotation system. Good. Says, we can't change everything all at once, but we can make adjustments. Well, some people do that, work within the system, and some people don't. Someone asks, if you were to write computer lib once again, 2020 edition, what would be different? Well, I actually started to outline it, and since everything would be different, there would be nothing. How would you teach media competence? I have no idea, because I don't know what there's so many different digital media, and they're mostly horrible. Justin Moore asks, who were your heroes? Well, Walt Disney, when I was a kid, and name loss. Frank Lloyd Wright, when I was 10, and Buckminster Fuller, when I think I was about 10, and Bertrand Russell. And I've sort of aimed between them. What can I say? How can Xanadu avoid dependence on a centralized directory? Well, if you look at the code for Xanadu Classic, it doesn't have a centralized directory. It has its own docuverse, which is maintained by 3 different enfilades. The spanfilade, the boomfilade, and I forget the third. Have you considered content-based addressing? No, you could say it's a way of doing something else. What would embedding HTML formatting qualify as transclusions? Absolutely not. Transclusion is content, not markup, not format. Which books on technology should everyone read? I have no idea. First of all, what is technology? Frying pan is technology. Shoelaces are technology. Ceramics are technology. Cloth is technology. And there are so many technologies now. Who the hell knows what's going to catch on in the future? What software do you use most other than your own? I use TextEdit on the Mac. Oh, and I prefer to use TextPad, which is a Windows program, which I have managed to get working on the Mac using a packager for wine. What's the most innovative software you've seen? I wouldn't answer that. I don't know what innovative means. It goes in all directions. Do you watch TV? No. Anything you would have done differently? Everything. What would you like to be remembered for? doing my best and being clever. If innovation happens elsewhere, how do I get there? How do I know? Ask me to sing more. Oh, what are your plans regarding all the tapes you're recording? Mine's been an experimental life, and I archived a whole lot of stuff that the tapes are going to stand for. Talking about mooted movies in Hollywood, perfect medium to spread concepts and ideas well to some people. What actors do you choose? I don't know. I don't know who the current actors are anyway. I haven't seen movies in years. I've seen very few movies. Xanadu AR. Well, it's just an interface. Are we moving into an era now where we all should have gone in the first place? I'm very, very cynical and very pessimistic. I don't think we're going to do anything good. How do you sort your books? I put them in cartons, label the cartons vaguely, and also I'm giving most of them to the Internet Archive. Here's someone named Thomas Bövith, I believe, who asks, does it make sense to imagine a tool that would convert the World Wide Web to your original idea of hypertext? The curious idea. A viewer that would do that. Well, we're working toward that with the new Xanabase with Edward Betts. That basically you'll be able to connect. You'll be able to connect to content of the web, but there's no way the content of the web can connect to you because they don't have those forms of connection. How do you see the world after Xanadu? Well, I'm very pessimistic. Would you try to encode your thinking patterns as distinct from their output to spread them more and more widely? What a strange question. There was a movie about that long ago. I can't remember who was in it or what it was called, where they were supposedly going to create a machine that would think like some great dying thinker. What can I say? My style of thinking is in my writings. I don't know what this is, what I'm supposed to squeal with glee about. Okay, well, so any more questions coming in?
You came in on chat here.
Okay, chat.
We have, do you think that how the web is set up currently is the reason for the fake news issue?
Do I think the web is set up currently? Well, what is it? It's all so mangled together. The web is a specific form of formatting. Although actually, as I've said to Tim Berners-Lee, all he needed to do was create the URL from which everything else followed. So before Berners-Lee created the URL, you had to address each server according to the rules of the company that made it. You had web servers from I can't remember the names of the original people the first people who sold Unix boxes, and from Microsoft and from Apple and so forth and so on. So there were many different, and every Unix box had its own formatting. So the monumental task of giving them all the same addressing structure, which is why we have %20 for the space. Why %20? I don't know. But that's what Tim worked out. And that essentially made all these different servers connectable by what other people call hyperlinks, by what I call by one-way jump links. So once he had created the URL, all the rest would have followed. Some format for pages, some format for pictures, etc., etc. So it was a lot of overkill. Very, very impressive guy. I like him as a person, and I very much admire him. But of course, I don't like the result. I don't like what he did, and the fact that it took over. If I hadn't made a big mistake in 1988, we would have had Xanadu classic out first, which doesn't mean it would have prevailed, but you would have seen visibly connected documents, and that would have had some effect. More questions?
Yeah, a few more. New technologies, young people coming into the game. Where can their focus be applied well?
It's anybody's guess. Certainly learn the command line, which I never did. That's where it all starts. And Python is the language du jour. And Kubernetes is the way to deploy Python for rapid response on the net, on the web. And and knowing all the tricks. And of course, the dangers, because the number of forms of attack is multiplying daily. And so, aside from the world of fake news and fake news on social media, then there's the internal attacks on the infrastructure. Of course, let's back up. See, computer security would have been possible. In fact, it existed in the Burroughs 5000. Ask Alan Kay. The Burroughs 5000 had capability-based security, which means that a specific token of accessibility is given to a specific user, and I believe, I can't remember the name now of the guy who did a lot of the capability-based patents, which have been expired, but the Intel architecture, essentially, which by the way was not designed at Intel, it was designed at Data Point, where I used to work. The Intel architecture prevents capability-based security, and there we are. There was a chip that had capability-based security built in, I believe, and it was from England, and it was subsidized by the English government, and it was with the Occam language, OCCAM, but it did not prevail. And so what might have been did not be, and we have today's leaky, dangerous world.
Role of science fiction in your life, or in what inspired you, that sort of thing.
Role of science fiction in my life. I started reading, till 1947 I loved the Oz books, and then I started reading pulp fiction, and my grandmother couldn't stand to have those around, so then I went to astounding science fiction, I guess about 49. So the classic age of science fiction. And I have complete runs of Galaxy from the first issue and Astounding from about the same time. And I was deeply moved by the writings of L. Ron Hubbard before Dianetics and before Scientology. I got off the ship when Dianetics came in. But I was very moved by his story To the Stars, where the young man is shanghaied onto a star freighter, and when he comes back, his sweetheart has become an old lady. When he comes back 2 weeks later, his sweetheart's an old lady. And later I met John W. Campbell. I was, amazingly enough, invited to a party that he annually gave in Cambridge, Mass. Freed Bales of Harvard said, well, I went to this thing last year. You might enjoy it. My God, it was John W. Campbell, Isaac Asimov. I've written about this elsewhere, but I don't remember. Another key author, and I asked if I could bring my friend Charlie Harris, so he came too. And we listened to Campbell reciting his old editorials. Well, Asimov looked very bored. I said to Asimov on this occasion, Mr. Asimov, soon we'll be reading and writing on computer screens. This was January 1961, I believe. And he said, yeah, sure. But anyway, the role of science fiction in my life was to expand and make me think about the world and what it would be like. Later I had lunch with Campbell, and he told me, I figured it out later, when I heard Asimov talk about it at a later WorldCon, how Campbell had recruited him as an author. He told him a story, and then Campbell was not himself allowed. I'll back up. In the 1930s, John W. Campbell wrote some of the most influential science fiction. But then he was made an editor of Astounding under the condition, I just heard at the Worldcon last year, under the condition that he not write any of his stories himself, so that he would tell them to authors and the authors would write them. So Asimov talked about how Campbell had recited the story to him, he had submitted, and it was published. And I didn't quite get that Campbell was reciting a story to me that I might submit and publish. Well, I didn't have time, and the rest isn't history, you could say. But I was deeply influenced and moved by science fiction, yes. And then in the 1960s, when I was teaching at Vassar, they announced on TV that there was going to be an adult science fiction show on TV. And I couldn't wait. So I turned it on. It was the first episode of Star Trek. And after 5 or 10 minutes, I turned it off. I was disgusted. And adult science fiction was what Campbell had created. But Star Trek was a bureaucracy in space with you might say, absurd characters, and this captain, this dopey captain in charge. Next question.
We have the brain has a mechanism to discard input judged irrelevant and connect with only relevance. Would it be important to have such a system in a hypertext system?
The brain, this brain, does the editing. I believe in human editing. My father was a TV director, and I would sit behind him in TV studios. All the shaping it took, change this, change that, to make the show come out right. Now today, you have all this junk software being created by people with no sense of user experience. And user experience is relegated to a specialist, right? Point is, an editor, a director needs to be in charge. Has there ever been such a director in software? Yes, and his name was Steve Jobs. A horrific human being, horrible man, but at the same time, a very great director. And he was able to shape the user's experience in a way that nobody has since. Apple today is not what it was under Steve Jobs. But yeah, the brain is some sort of. I saw an earlier version of it. It's a so-called mind map. I mean, making dumb connections. Well, okay.
We have what provides the best opportunity for Xanadu to be implemented into widespread use. Maybe what are the main blockers you see?
Everything is a blocker. I'm just working on it the best I can. The Xanadu-based design that Edward is working on is to be it will be a Python installable for each platform, Linux, Mac, Windows, and it will collect content from anywhere on the net, unlike the web, which is restricted as to what content it can bring in, and be able to publish on the net as well.
Let's see if books and content you're working on now outside of Xanadu.
I don't have any time to write books anymore. I do these videotapes. The videos for YouTube is a hobby, and I hardly have time for that. Just everyday life, and so I may do only a few more. Or I've been trying to upload every 2 weeks. I think it'll be less often. The two I most want to do and hope to finish are an overview of history and an indignant overview of mathematics, which is because the things I wish I'd been taught, because I hated mathematics as a kid. Still can't do arithmetic, but the concepts are extremely interesting, and none of those were made evident to me as a youngster, and at least making clear some of the things that someone who hates numbers would like. This is important. Your battery's running out, James. Do you have a connection?
Yep.
Okay, keep talking, you said. We could go on. We'd go on some length more, but if there are no more questions, I can gibber on any subject.
Would you like to gibber on any subject?
Well, let's see. First, see if anything. First, let's get plugged in. So I'm at the Internet Archive, which is a wonderful place, wonderfully idealistic. Its founder, Brewster Kahle, is an amazing man, and it has a staff of many brilliant people, over 100 people around the world. It ticks like a watch, and I'm just very honored to hang out here. I come here on Fridays. If people want to meet with me or have conversations, I say come on a Friday afternoon. I won't make any appointments.
Question about, was there ever a video version of Xanadu where video cuts to transcluded clips from various...
Oh, sure. That was always part of the plan. but since text is shall we say, the most difficult case. See, computer people think that text is easy. Text is the most difficult case. All the other cases would use the same model, audio and video.
For text, would Xanadu handle like richly formatted or stylized text?
In Xanadu, all formatting is done by links, by Xanalinks. It doesn't work with existing formats. We do not import formats. We translate them if we use them at all.
Thoughts on version control systems like Git?
Well, again, you see, I see almost everything as a cut-down version of Xanadu. Git is hard for me to understand. But basically, and version control, as programmers see it, is sequential. And I think it is on Git as well. So that if a thing breaks sequence, you have difficulty recognizing that it's the same content that's been moved around. So refactoring a program is not well represented by version control systems that have been created in the computer world. Whereas refactoring in the Xanadu system, at least if the same code is not involved, is straightforward. So yeah, sorry.
Do you follow like recent hypertext research or development?
No. I mean, I'm doing my own thing. When I was young, I read 20 computer journals and related magazines. Now, there's no way to keep track of what else is happening, and it's not really relevant because my path is fixed.
Do you plan to visit Norway soon?
I have no plans for travel abroad. It might be nice. I've been to Norway, I think, 4 or 5 times. Love it, love the people. There's the most laughter in Norway that I've ever heard. And of course, I thought I was Norwegian until I was about 4 years old. You might be interested, by the way, in my autobiography, Possiplex, which is very well written, and I simulated parallel pages with fonts. A big layout job. I'm very proud of my paper documents, which unfortunately are not well, which worked out very well back in the day. Any more?
Yeah. We have thoughts on a quote. Write drunk, edit sober.
That makes sense. The point is that the first draft, or the collection of notes from which you start. See, I start from a huge collection of notes, which say the same thing over and over and over. This is why I have to have cut and paste. I don't understand people who don't understand the cut and paste problem. Because what cut and paste, of course, meant before the Macintosh was an author would cut up a draft and rearrange the pieces, and then and then those would be either typeset or he would then retype it or whatever. And so I forget which author carried a knife around his neck for cutting up his paper. And Tolstoy called these cut up pieces his noodles. But computer people who tend to write one paragraph and then write another paragraph and then write one section at a time don't understand the total indeterminacy of having many, many notes in an arbitrary or unknowable sequence from which to decide. I recommend very highly the paper, a writing from the New Yorker called Structure by John McPhee, the author. He talks about how in his first New Yorker assignment, he lay on a picnic table for 2 weeks, unable to know where to start, because there was no determinate sequence. And in a New Yorker type article, which is a long piece covering many aspects and many connections, there is no, quote, logical, no hierarchical way to structure it. There's only the cloud of connected thoughts, which you are trying, which because of the nature of today's writing, you must put into one sequence. And that is why the extension of writing, which I have endeavored to implement, parallel pages with visible connections, is the next step up from a single sequence, which does not violate that single sequence, which extends it, and yet which is not too complicated. I'm going to run and get something to show you. So I'm very proud of the text, of the printed things that I've laid out. And I talk about this one a lot because I'm especially proud of it. I did it when I was 19. This is Nothing Number 3, a kite-shaped magazine. And you had to rotate it as you turned the pages. And it was a very, very strange item. And I don't know how I did it with all the typesetting in funny shapes. But there it is. And the cartoons, by the way, are by Russ Ryan. Here is a nice handout I did. So to distribute the ZigZag floppy disk of 1996 by Andrew Pemp, I created this nice triangular giveaway. I'm very proud of my book, Geeks Bearing Gifts, which Brewster Kalis called the best computer history book ever written, because of the layout, so that each story is a separate, each thread of computer history is a separate story. And I'm especially proud of my autobiography, Possiplex, because of the way in which I made the different stories. I gave the different stories different typographies to distinguish them as essentially parallel threads. So paper layout, which is very hard, has been something I'm proud of.
Question, are these scanned and available on the internet?
No, no. You can buy the book at Amazon. You can buy Possiplex, you can buy Geeks Bearing Gifts. I have made the videos for instructions on how to download your own copy of Nothing Number 3 and assemble it, but whether I'll have time to edit those videos, who knows. I mean, to put up a video takes time, hours, especially if it has pieces, right? Nothing takes more time than video editing or movie editing. It's horrific. I spent the summer of 1959 editing my movie, The Epiphany of Slocum Furlough, and, weekends of that summer, Saturday and Sunday, all summer long. And it was really tough.
We have a question about music tastes. What kind of music do you listen to?
I don't have time to make selections. Right now, I just listen to the classic station. I was the first Beatles fan, I believe, in the United States. I listened to WFUN, a bubblegum rock of the 1963. I'm very sentimental about that, but there's no way to hear it now because it's copyrighted and not anywhere. And so on WFUN in Miami, they came on with, and here's a song by this group in England called the Beatles, and they played Please Please Me. And I was electrified, and I jumped on my bicycle and bicycled a mile or two to Coral Gables to the music store and tried to order the record, and they'd never heard of it. And it wasn't released in this country until a year later. So I can claim to be the first, or one of the first Beatles fans in this country. And I loved the Beatles for a while. But that was then. It's still the first rattling ones like Please Please Me that I like best. They got moony after that.
A few comments. Would love to see a Nothing Number 3 demo. Some fans.
Yeah, well, okay. I go.
Also, some ZigZag is awesome comments.
Oh, thank you.
Thoughts on ZigZag currently?
Yes, well, it's still there. You can download the GZZ from Finland. It works very nicely. It did Tuomas Luka did a wonderful job assembling the team that put it together. And it took about, I guess, 20 man-years, 12 man-years. It was a big job, because it's a specific structure. So you have multiple dimensions. They're not Cartesian dimensions, which are measurable. They're listing dimensions. So a spreadsheet has a listing dimension horizontally and a listing dimension vertically. And we just extend that notion and then set the cells free so that any cell the left edge of any cell can connect to the right edge of any cell, and so on vertically, and in as many dimensions as you like, and that's ZigZag. And the ZigZag interactive machine, I call it VIM, a virtual interactive machine, receives user input, calculates all the next cellular positions and their visible connections, and then must animate the tweening between the current state and that next state. So it's a remarkable, it's read-eval print in n dimensions, you can say. I wish it were better appreciated. I wish it had caught on more.
You've described widely how roaming through hypertext can feel through physical connections, but not so much how the creation portion would feel. Would one write in a blank screen and then connect?
Yes,
how would that process work?
or modify an existing page. So the version refers to all the pages at an instant, all the pages and their connections at an instant. So you jump into a version, make a new version by making a change.
Any chance of a re-release?
Of course, by the way, there are micro versions and there are author-significant versions, but we don't need to get into it. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Any chance of a re-release of literary machines?
Re-release? No, I mean, nothing new has happened. Buy the old one.
Do you see the Xanadu project becoming a major worldwide system like www?
I did. I have no idea now, but I can't stop.
Someone asking if the Kubla Khan poem is recorded and available.
Well, of course it is. Just go to YouTube. Look for Kubla Khan. I can recite the first verse or two. In Xanadu, Xanadu is a real place, by the way. It's I can't remember. I think it's 400 kilometers north of Beijing. I'm not sure now. I used to know. My collaborator, Robert Adamson Smith in England, found in Google Earth at that time, what I believe is the actual place. Now I could go scrambling around Google Earth, but I don't have time to look for it. And I believe that's at, let me send it. Hey, what's happening here? I'm just trying to get a blank. I'm just trying to get a new browser window. Slash. Oh hell, I can't remember. I can't remember the URL. So it's up there somewhere. We've got the right, but I can't find it because I'm not on my own machine. The actual satellite view of what exactly matches Marco Polo's description. Let me go back. Marco Polo was one of several travelers who reached China in the late Middle Ages, but he wrote a bestseller about the travel. Unfortunately, there's no definitive edition, and various printers added garbage, like dog-headed people and whatnot. But parts of it appear to be exactly correct, like the number of bridges in Beijing, and the description of Xanadu, or Shandu, is a rectangle with subrectangles, and that's what we see in the satellite picture. According to Marco Polo, he actually attended Kublai Khan and was asked to bring back 100 Christians to try to convert them. But when a return voyage was attempted, he managed to get 2 ministers who dropped out right away. By the way, there's an excellent book called In Xanadu by William Dalrymple, beautifully written. He actually made the same trip that Marco Polo had made, from Venice all the way to Xanadu and back. He did it in a brief period when all the borders happened to be open, and with the help of 2 remarkable collaborators. So this is, and it's a beautifully written book if you're interested in history, and the god-awful places, or the god-awful condition of the places that he traveled through, and the awful conditions he survived in order to get through it and write the book. And he wrote this, I think, before he was 20. He's an amazing author. So William Dalrymple, Dalrymple. And so now the Chinese government says that the site is the place they call Shandu, but that is not the S-H-A-N, in our writing, S-H-A-N-D-U, but that is not the place that my collaborator Rob Smith found in the satellite picture. Again, I'd love to update that, but hey, I don't have time. If somebody else can find it, first I'll have to publish it better. I've tried to put it into a video, but it's dark enough that it just comes out as a black square in the videos I've tried.
Here we go. What's your favorite color?
Purple. Purple and red are wired into us in various ways. Red is the color of blood, or which is danger, or opportunity if you've killed if you've hit blood in an enemy, or raw meat. And purple, for some reason, is the color of royalty in both ancient Rome and ancient Japan. And there was no connection between those two. So why purple should have been the color of royalty, who can imagine?
How do you cope with having so many interests? How do you decide what not to work on?
It's accident. I'm very distractible.
What's the best book you've read recently?
Well, I haven't finished Dalrymple's in Xanadu, but I recommend it highly. Remarkable book by an author whose name I can't remember, who changed genders, called A Queer and Pleasant Danger, about his or her experiences with the Scientologists, among other things, and her close relationship with L. Ron Hubbard, which ended abruptly. And I'm reading the luscious volume by Gail Green about her sexual and dietary exploits. I don't remember the name of the book. It's G-A-E-L, and I think it's G-R-E-E-N-E, but I'm not sure. The tour has ended, so it's getting noisy. We may have to call it, bring this to a halt.
I'd like to wrap up.
Yeah, well, give me one more question.
You have what's your reading speed, and is it difficult?
My reading, I have no idea what my reading speed is. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast. So I skim a lot. I read the first sentence of a lot of paragraphs. I took a course in speed reading when I was a kid, and I'm not sure what good it did. I do remember they asked me my occupation. I was 16. I wasn't going to put down student, so I wrote poet, philosopher, and rogue. I kind of held to that.
And
Last question.
there's no questions here.
Okay. All right, folks. This has been an interesting experiment. I hope you've enjoyed it. And thanks a lot for listening. Where do we go? Here.